for joining us for our third Universal Apostolic Preference Understanding the Jesuit webinar. Today we have Tinamarie Stoltz from our campus ministry office, and she can introduce herself.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for being here today for Mission Week. This is so exciting. This presentation is called Walking with the Excluded. And so my name is Tinamarie Stoltz. I'm a campus minister here at St. Joe's. I also teach theology. My main roles include the Winter Immersion Program, CLC, and communications.
Hi all, my name is Andrew Hawes. I'm a freshman here at St. Joseph's University. I study finance and risk management and insurance. This past year, really, I've had the pleasure of joining campus ministry on their Winter Immersion Program. TM and I traveled down to El Paso and sharing a little bit about our journey together.
Yeah. We will. This is a picture that we took while we were at Iglesia Luterana Cristo Rey in El Paso. And so kind of in a weird way, we'd also like to introduce you to the Winter Immersion Program. We're an immersion program that meets all year. And we invite students to live out a faith that does justice by encountering God's love in the relationships made along El Camino, or the way, and living out justice-centered values upon return. So we are so excited to be here with you all today. Thank you so much, Father Joyce and Eric, for inviting us. And we are going to jump in and get started. So we started with introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about what are apostolic preferences. We're going to define walking with the excluded. Then you'll hear a great talk from Andrew Haas. I'm so excited about that. And then we're going to have a discussion, which I think is really exciting. And we'll be using the chat feature for that. But you're always welcome to raise your hand at any point as we go forward. So let's jump in. So what are apostolic preferences? So about every 10 years, the Jesuits discern their apostolic preferences, right? So it's like, what are we going to focus in on? What are the things that should be aligning our work? What does it really mean to live out our mission in this time? Which I think is so important, right? And I think this is one way that the Jesuits are just so great, is they really meet the times. And they're able to meet the moment through a spirit of discernment, right? Through a spirit of deciding which is the better way to go, the way that is more mission, which is just really, really great. And the apostolic preferences are, of course, for the Jesuits, but because it impacts all of their organizations and what they're doing as a unit, of course, that also impacts all of the lay people and organizations that they are in charge of as well. So once again, it's setting a set of priorities. And so today we are focusing on walking with the excluded, but there are a bunch of apostolic preferences. Some of them are here, showing the way to God, walking with the excluded, journeying with youth, and caring for our common home. And again, these things are not totally in separate boxes, right? A lot of these have intersections. And one thing I just want to name just right off the bat, because it is Mission Week, Ignatian spirituality. My favorite thing about it is it deals with reality. I really could not practice a spirituality that was not practical. And so it deals with life as it is. And it is about a call and a response, right? So what are we called to, right? The excluded, right? We're going to talk more about that. There's a call there. And the question is, how are we responding? How are we walking with those who are excluded? Any questions so far? Feeling good? Okay, great. All right, so we're going to take a few minutes to reflect on a few important questions to start us off. So I'll give us about a minute for each of these next two questions. Can I recall a time I felt excluded? What happened and what did that feel? So we're going to take a minute. And then on the flip side, can I recall a time I excluded someone or a group of people? Why might I have done that? And what did that feel like? Okay. So if anyone wants to raise their hand or maybe put in the chat, back to that first question, can you recall a time you felt excluded? And what did it feel like? I mean, you do not need to share your personal stuff on here. I would never ask you to do that. But does anyone want to share, like, what does it feel like to be excluded? What emotions maybe arise? Once again, you can put it in the chat or you can raise your hand.
The last part you said, yeah.
Yeah, look at me. I put funny pictures.
Sort of like
Angry,
early version of
lonely.
Yeah, exactly. Or like your little.
Yeah, angry, lonely. Those are tough. Those are tough ones. Felt insignificant or not important. Yeah. Othered, alienated. Yeah. Yeah.
It's trust. Right on.
It is.
It's
Not seen. Yep. And we start with these questions. And I know that was like kind of a big jump in, but I think it's really important to jump into that first. Because walking with the excluded, right? This is really about mutuality, right? And so when we enter this idea, this apostolic preference of walking with the excluded from our own brokenness, from our own hurt, from our own pain, right? When we enter through our broken window, and others are entering through their broken windows, we can really create a space of mutuality, right? And a place of vulnerability. That's not just oh, you're excluded and I as the in-group am going to include you. You're so welcome, right? That there's this sense of walking with the excluded is not just what we do, it is what we do, but it's also about who we are, right? So that sense of mutuality is really, really important. Especially when, like, all of us can know what it's like to be excluded to varying degrees. Thank you all for sharing. I appreciate that. So once again, let's define, how do the Jesuits define walking with the excluded? So the Jesuits say, to walk with the poor, the outcasts of the world, those whose dignity has been violated, in a mission of reconciliation and justice. Wow, that's a lot of powerful stuff and very Ignatian, very powerful, very like short and well said, but also very powerful. So we're gonna walk through this a little bit, okay? So to walk with, right? What does that mean? So when we're talking about walking with the excluded, we're not just talking about theory, right? People are not just theories. Communities are not just theories, right? They're not just talking points for advocacy and they're not just people to be served, right? When we talk about walking with, what we're really talking about is being in relationship with. And I think that is so crucial to understanding this apostolic preference, right? Being in relationship with. And once again, in a way that is very authentic and mutual, all right? So to walk with. Then we have this next part. I think what's really, really important here. So when we talk about people who are outcasts, excluded, materially poor, marginalized, right? The outcasts of the world. I think it's just very important to note that this is people who are often forced or pushed there because of money or power or greed or discrimination. It's that people are outcasted, they are excluded, their dignity has been violated. This is a verb, this is not an identity. And I just really think that that is very, very crucial for our understanding of this apostolic preference, right? This is something that like people are outcast because they're outcasted. They're not just outcast, they've been outcasted. So that I think is very, very crucial. And then this last bit, right, justice and reconciliation. So again, justice meaning, right, the changing of systems and structures that harm, right? So what bigger systems do we have? What structures do we have that exclude people, that harm people, that make people feel outcasted or outcast others? And then the reconciliation is really about being in right relationship, right? So I really like this apostolic preference because it does address the micro and macro levels of our societies. Any questions on that? Using the chat, or if you want to raise your hand or call out, whatever works for you. Any questions on this so far? So this is the image that the Jesuits have chosen to demonstrate this apostolic preference. Migrants on a ship. But I want to ask, like, when we think about people who are outcasted, people who are excluded, who else are we referring to? And once again, you can call it out, put it in the chat. Who else are we referring to? What groups of people, what communities of people? People living in poverty. Yep. Thank you, Jill. Yes. What other groups of people? People of color. Yep. Those who have no political voice or power. Yeah. Those who are mentally ill. Yep. Those who are hungry. Yeah. Very true. Can you think of any, Andrew? Because marginalized because of their religious beliefs. Yep.
South America too. That was that.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. Those who don't think like us. Yeah, that is happening at alarming rates. Yeah, absolutely. Good. Anyone else that you can think of? Any other communities that you can think of? Yeah. Thank you all so much. So we are going to watch this little video from Pope Francis that talks about the margins, and I think really gets at walking with the excluded.
Una persona sin techo que muere en la calle nunca va a aparecer en la primera página de los buscadores de internet o de los noticieros. ¿Cómo hemos podido llegar a este nivel de indiferencia? ¿Cómo dejamos que la cultura del descarte, en la que millones de hombres y mujeres no valen nada frente a los beneficios económicos, cómo dejamos que esta cultura domine nuestras vidas, nuestras ciudades, nuestro modo de vivir? Se nos va a endurecer el cuello de tanto mirar al otro lado para no ver esta situación. Por favor, dejemos de hacer invisibles a los que están al margen de la sociedad, ya sea por motivos de pobreza, independencia, enfermedades psíquicas o minusvalías. Centremos en la acogida, en acoger a todas las personas que lo necesitan. La cultura de la acogida, de recibir, de dar techo, de dar hogar, de dar amor, de dar calidez humana. Oremos para que las personas que viven al margen de la sociedad, en condiciones de vida infrahumanas, no sean olvidadas por las instituciones y nunca sean descartadas.
So again, right, he named a lot of other people in there, right? And again, I think Pope Francis really gets at this walking with the excluded is like that people are not asked to be excluded. It's not their identity. It's something that is happening to them. It's happening on a societal level, and it's happening in our personal lives. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about walking with the excluded, and it'll be very quick, and then later Andrew will share his story. And so when I did postgrad service in Detroit, I was serving in a food pantry and a soup kitchen. I was with Christ the King Service Corps. And so I was new to the neighborhood. It was my first time really, being far from home. I really didn't quite know how to fit in right away. And I can't think of how many times people were just very, very inclusive of me. And I can think back to this one time, it was pouring rain. It was just absolutely pouring rain. And I had to go every day. I did my delivery. So I went and I picked up food and I brought breakfast back from Einstein's actually. And so it was pouring rain. I stuck my pants in my socks because I didn't want to get my pants wet. And so I looked absolutely ridiculous. And so when I walked in, all of my clients were teasing me and they were calling me MC Hammer, and they were teasing me in a fun way. But once again, I was new. So I was still trying to get the lay of the land. And I was still trying to figure out my place and what I was called to do there. And so one of the guys, Ron, he had a huge mustache and wolf-like hair. He was just a gray hair. He was just the absolute funniest guy. And he was teasing me the most. And he was like, "Oh, you have big feet." And I was like, "You know what, Ron, I'm very tall. So I need my big feet to stand." And so he was like, "Well, what size are you anyway?" And I was like, "I'm an 11 in women's or a 9 in men's, Ron. Stop being so sassy." And he was like, "Well, why don't you have boots? Didn't you bring boots with you?" And I was like, "No, I came with a suitcase." And I was like, "I'm getting paid $100 a month here, Ron. I don't have money for boots." And so this man, right, who comes to our soup kitchen and our food pantry every day, knocks on the door the next day. Next day, I hear this on the door. And I'm like, "Hey, Ron, how you doing?" And he pulls out boots that people were giving away at another shelter down the street. And he was like, "These are for you and your big feet, welcome to the neighborhood." And that to me, was Ron walking with me in a way that made me feel very included. And that happened probably, I got there in July. That happened probably September. And it really was a turning point in my year to where I felt like I was like, okay, I'm part of this community. And so I still have the boots. I will never get rid of them. They are my favorite pair of boots. And Ron passed away a little whiles ago. It's hard to be out on the streets, especially as you get older. So thinking about Ron and just very grateful for him teaching me about this apostolic. And so we are going to jump into Andrew's story, and then we will have our own discussion. So Andrew, take it away.
Perfect. So I'll just kind of reintroduce myself. My name's Andrew Hawes. I was on the El Paso immersion trip with TM and about 8 other SJU students. And I kind of wanted to reflect on this, what walking to the excluded now means to me versus what it meant to me in the past. So I'll begin. Have you ever felt invisible in a crowd, as if your struggles were unnoticed by the world? I was standing on the edge of a bustling street, a cacophony of traffic, construction, laughter, and chatter filling the air, all mixed together to create a quasi-Philly symphony. It's just another Tuesday, and I'm journeying to my 10:10 before class begins. I was having a brief conversation while listening to my favorite song, and as I prepared to cross the street, the ebb and flow of traffic halted for 15 seconds, and the white silhouette man appeared, allowing me to be on my way. Taking a step forward, my balance wavered, and the uneven weight of my pack pulled me to the ground. My hands bearing the weight of my body caught my fall, with the only casualty being slight blood loss, a scar on my hand, and the imprint of concrete on my palm. Continuing to class, I noticed that no one had batted an eye as I fell, as if I was transparent to the entire world and simply just another number in society. All of a sudden, the noise and chaos fell to calm dispassion, and I looked up to view a portrait of life I've never seen before. A mosaic of the world that isn't viewed often, that doesn't get shown in a museum or gallery. Amidst the crowd, I noticed those who seem invisible to the world, individuals who have been pushed to the margins, bearing the burden of stories untold and struggles that are silent. Individuals whose scars tell stories, stories that are etched with resilience, all yearning for understanding. Persons who are intentionally or unintentionally forgotten and excluded. I continued to class, but something was off. Something just, it didn't seem right. In an instant, my mind flashed 2 years ago when feeling alone, misunderstood, and invisible was a commonality for me. A time when I suffered due to hardship and pain. I flashed back. The unknown of their stories had pulled at my heartstrings, and it compelled me to step forward and act. But that 10-10 awaited. There was a quiz that day, and if I was late, the best I could do was negotiate for a 70. It's moments such as these that we're presented with a tough choice. Do we continue with indifference, or do we pause, listen, and do we lend an ear? Now, the first option is simple, and it requires minimal effort. You choose option A and you take the quiz, there's no strings attached. I recognize that there was an emotional attachment to the event, and I'm now aware of that going forward. Next time, I was sure to act. It's just right now, I'm dealing with my own struggles. If I choose option B, then I get to hear a story that no longer remains untold. I understand the struggles and the scars of a person, and all of a sudden I stand by them. I stand with them. By some miracle, I arrive at my test on time. I take it and I do well. I recognized and now have acted on my recognition. I received a call to walk with the excluded, and I picked up. As I sit before you today, I vividly recall the pivotal moment when I realized that empathy alone wasn't nearly enough. I needed to do something. As I stood at the crossroads in my own life, I sat down to listen to an individual who was making a true difference, a Jesuit whose task was to seek justice for those living on the margins. I knew that my step forward, it had to be action. It had to be understanding this recognition and walking with the excluded. But how could I prepare? How could I overcome my own biases and prejudices to truly connect with others? Well, the call, it's something. It begins with a stirring force inside of you that prompts reflection, research, education, and a commitment to walk with individuals on their path. A commitment to empathy, to solidarity, to being with and for others. Preparing my heart, it wasn't just about acquiring knowledge and skills. It was about transforming my mind to think differently, to be open to understanding the meaning of words such as empathy, humility, social justice, and human dignity. Preparing my heart caused a great deal of discernment and long hours of reflectionary time to perceive and understand the world around me. It meant attending winter immersion meetings on Mondays and interacting with presentations and handouts to confront the biases that I myself had. It meant holistically researching the immigration system and forfeiting my preconceived notions that the media had created. It meant downloading Duolingo and learning Spanish independently. It meant digging into the news to find voices that are often drowned out by the clamor of society. It meant being comfortable with the uncomfortable, having an open heart and a willingness to learn, listen, and grow. It meant embracing this idea of selflessness, of being fully present with and for others. There's a word egotism, and it never sat well with me. The practice of talking and thinking about oneself excessively because of an undue sense of self-importance, it's always tough for me to justify. Our American society emphasizes and frankly praises selfishness, a barrier that's very important to recognize. By identifying roadblocks such as these and the white savior complex, that idea of I can fix it, we prepared our hearts for the emotional journey that we would endure through WIP as TM and I and our group traveled to El Paso. Termed the Winter Immersion Program, WIP is centered around providing a transformative experience to participants by taking them to the heart of marginalized communities and fostering empathy via direct interaction with those facing hardships to inspire advocacy and justice-seeking efforts by sharing their life stories. And we did just this in El Paso. While in El Paso, our familia, which is a group of 8 SJU students, all were transformed, understanding the true meaning of what walking with the excluded meant. You know, I originally viewed this as 4 words whose meaning was superficial, but I would come to learn that this is really far from the truth. This phrase identifies specific values, words that are very elusive in meaning, such as solidarity and kinship. Walking with the excluded, it's not walking near them, and it's not acting and working from afar. This phrase is rooted in the idea of understanding, knowing who individuals truly are, digging to the root. The Spanish word is aferrarse, of their values, of what they are sharing at the table. It's knowing what each scar stands for and how each tribulation has impacted their life. Walking with the excluded is about sharing what you were given, sharing your testimony. Adam was a teen from Venezuela, worked year in and year out, saving every penny he made to fund his journey to the United States. Roughly about a year ago, Adam ventured to the border with his belief in God and faith as his only compass. Traveling through countries such as Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Mexico, Adam headed for the United States. Yet, understanding Adam, it's not knowing that he traveled through 6 states to reach the United States. Understanding Adam is digging deeper into his story. It's understanding that his journey was lengthy and dangerous, often staring death in the eyes. Knowing Adam is to know that amid the scorching desert, relentless sunbeams beaming down on his back, Adam pressed on. It's understanding that as the vast sea of dunes stretched for miles, the air thick, with visual heat waves radiating from the ground, Adam pressed on. It's understanding that the corruption in Mexico or of the Mexican Border Patrol and police caused him to lie on the street begging for money, begging for food, shelter, and water. To know Adam is to know the horrors he had witnessed along the way, skulls laying barren on the ground as he crossed a river, raging with rapids, embodying the harshness of the unforgiving land that he must conquer. Knowing Adam is to know that he boarded a train La Bestia, whizzing past lush foliage at 40 miles per hour, with nothing but the hope of getting further north, with getting further to his dream. Walking with the excluded is staying with them as they tell their story, as they recall their path to the United States. Walking with the excluded is staying in the same house as someone who our word names refugee, cooking with them, serving food for nearly 200 migrants, and interacting with them afterward, not asking how are they doing for politeness, but for a yearning for understanding who they are. It's sitting down with multiple individuals for 1 to 2 hours and listening intently to their journey as they unravel their personal stories and their narratives. It's spending an entire week with a family whose love for you was so rich and deep, and then leaving abruptly, knowing quite well this could be the very last time that you ever see them. Yes, this was immersion. Listening to Adam, Lauren, Aaliyah, Tori, and Joyce as they unfolded their testimony, filled with sorrow and loss, seemingly stitched together by their resounding faith in Christ. I have cooked a Colombian dish, arepas, alongside Adam, whose cooking was tangible knowledge of food. Food is something that you can't strip away from an individual. I found common ground in a smile, a beam that relays the sentiment, I am here with you. I've been an eyewitness to individuals who are pushed to the margins, those who are intentionally or unintentionally forgotten and excluded, holding their hands and praying with them, crafting connections that transcend boundaries. As I sit here today between the crossroads of empathy and action, I now know what walking the excluded means to me. It's an approach. It begins with a commitment to solidarity, empathy, and a genuine human connection that fosters personal growth. Through the Winter Immersion Program, I learned to look beyond the surface and dig in with a compassionate heart, actively engaging and listening to the testimonies woven with faith and resilience of Adam, Lauren, Aaliyah, Tori, and Joyce. For me, this was immersion. This was walking with the excluded. Going forward, I now stand committed to journeying on a path of empathy and action, knowing the true changes begin with a willingness to walk alongside those whose voices are often silenced. I stand committed to reaching out and becoming engaged in advocacy programs that seek justice. I stand to be a catalyst for change, and I now ask you to do the same. Together, we can create a difference in society, a compassionate community for all. The call is now, and I hope, like you, like me, you pick up. Thank you.
Andrew. We really appreciate that, Andrew. Thank you so much. And now we're going to have a reflection, and we are going to take some time to think about Andrew's great words. Thank you so much, Andrew. And what does all of this mean for our own lives? And so if you would feel safe to do so, if you just want to get into a comfortable position, taking a few deep breaths. I know for me, sometimes I like to put my hand over my heart. Maybe you want to have your hands open. Take the biggest breath you've taken all day. We'll have some time for reflection. Who am I called to walk with? Even if I am already part of that community, who am I called to walk with? And why am I called to walk with them? How can I truly be with? What practical steps can I take to walk with the excluded? What might my next step be? When you're ready, you can open your eyes and return to this space. And now I was thinking we could have a discussion. So I'm gonna put us into 2 breakout rooms. We hope that that was a fruitful discussion for you. Is there anything that anybody would like to share from their discussion that got said that they thought was really great? You can put it in the chat. Or you can raise your hand, whatever works for you. No pressure. Maybe something someone said that you were like, snaps. You tell them a campus minister. Great. So in conclusion, we just have a few. Oh, here's the rest of the group. So sorry. All right. Great. Is there anything that anyone wants to share from their time in their groups that they thought was particularly great? You can take yourself off mute and shout it out, or you can put it in the chat. Maybe something you said you wanted to share, something someone else said appropriately that was thought was really great.
So it's something the breakout room group 1 sort of kept coming back to was just the idea of you don't know the story of the person standing right in front of you in like an everyday presence. So if we aren't in a place of immersion per se, like still being aware that it's not just for later, but that we can start now, this idea of walking with and not assuming that the person in front of you doesn't need someone to walk with them.
Oof.
Yeah.
Snaps for real. Oof.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was all of us. It was a collective group, group 1.
Group 1.
Yeah,
Wasn't
right.
Wow.
Crushed it, group 1. Group 2 also crushed it. So we will end with some practical tips, practical steps. Again, walking with the excluded, definitely for all, right? So I think once again, starting with our own exclusion, the times that we felt excluded, what does that feel like? It kind of stops that saviorism, and it, most importantly, it creates mutuality. Walking with the excluded is supposed to bring a sense of belonging to all of us, right? A mutual belonging to all of us. And so starting with our own exclusion can be helpful in that process. I also think we have to be conscious of not excluding to include. That is really hard some days. And it's like, you know, it's not just kicking some people out so that some people can be included. But also it's right, this gray area of like, yes, and it's also knowing when safe spaces are needed, where like sometimes that is also an important space. So it's about like being able to discern when those things need to be happening. Another practical step is like making time that it's part of our lives, is part of our communication. And so it's part of who we are, right? Not just what we do, but who we are. And then always rooting in relationship. I don't think that, I think more so than, I think all the apostolic preferences root in this, because I think this is very much what we are called to on a human level, on a spiritual level, that we are creatures of community, and that is how we are designed. Really, no matter how you look at a human person, we are social beings, and yeah, so relationship. If you are feeling called to walk with the excluded in a certain way, please reach out, let us know. We would love to help you in that journey and in that discernment. Any last questions before we end? You can shout it out, you can use the chat, whatever works for you. Or maybe we're just excellent. explainer.
That's what I'm thinking.
No, that's
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
thinking too.
right.
And also, we were listening, we were bopping in on some of the things. Just thank you all so much. That was such a life-giving conversation and space. We were doing a lot of snaps. You couldn't see it, but we were like, yeah, like we were really hype about it. So thank you all so much. This was just such a sacred space. You've given me all this life and energy. So thank you so much for coming. We're so
Yes.
appreciative of your time. And here is our contact information. If you'd like to reach out, Instagram, email, let us know, whatever works for you. Again, thank you so much for your time. And we hope that you have a great day. And also we have an event coming. This is a shameless plug. We have an event coming up called Encuentro, which is story sharing about all of our immersion sites. And it's story sharing, advocacy, and food. March 25th in Cardinal Foley, 7:30 doors open, 8 o'clock story sharing begins. And that is going to be a really great space too. I mean, Andrew will be there, and so will the rest of the familia. So again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for living out the mission here at St. Joe's. It's an honor to work with all of you, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Tinamarie and Andrew. That was a great presentation.
Thanks again.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank you.